Hello, and welcome to the premiere episode of Across the Dinerverse, searching for the heart and soul of America, one diner at a time. I'm your host, John Murphy. I'll tell you a little bit about myself in just a second, but first, why do a podcast in a diner, and what the hell is it all about? So there are over 8,300 diners and cafes across the country. People from all walks of life, religion, careers, sexual identity, political leaning, young and old, they all eat in diners. They're great places to meet people and have conversations pretty much about anything. Some say the American dream is dead. Democracy is finished. We're a divided nation over class, race, wealth, opportunities, equality, political ideology. And while everybody has different beliefs and ideas on where we should be heading as a country, I kind of think we're more similar than we are different. We all want and need the same things: love, a purpose, friends, security, both physical and financial, independence, goals, good health, bountiful life experiences, feeling connected, and of course, comfort food. That's why we bring the whole diner thing in, all right? Now, it's easy to get swallowed up in the news cycle and overwhelmed with all the chatter on our socials about the latest outrage and who's getting canceled and why and who else should get canceled. It's a total life suck, and we all get pulled into it. I want to show that's not the case. I mean, I think that's my dog barking in the background, by the way. That's Dusty. Thank you, Dusty, for being on the show. But I want to show that that's not the case. I think we're better than that, based on my own life experiences. See, I travel the country as a writer and producer on the CBS Science and Technology series Innovation Nation, Saturday mornings on CBS. Check your local listings. And I've met some pretty amazing people on the road who are different from me in almost every way. And yet, making that eye contact and simply listening to one another, we get along just fine. And maybe we learn something new, or at least we're open to considering what someone else thinks, even if in the end we disagree. At least we have some context about why they have a certain point of view. So by absorbing other people's stories and life experiences, maybe we'll grow and have a little more empathy and respect for one another and strengthen those ties that bind us and makes America awesome, right? So to take care of some business real quick, you can support Across the Dinerverse on Patreon by visiting patreon.com/Dinerverse. That's patreon.com/Dinerverse. Yeah, it's a made-up word, but here's how you spell it. Dinerverse, Dinerverse. Join the conversation, send me a message, recommend a diner to go to. That'd be fun. And become a supporter to get bonus and exclusive content. That's patreon.com/Dinerverse. And for this premiere episode, I thought I'd stick close to home, which is Pasadena, California. And there's this great diner called Pie and Burger. In fact, I got the exact address right here. It's 913 East California Boulevard, right near Lake Avenue. It's been there for a long, long time. I've taken me and my family there to have burgers and pie. Oh, the butterscotch pie. Oh, the butterscotch pie. So good. The owner is Michael Osborne. I just cold called him and said, hey, I've got this wacky idea for a podcast called Across the Dinerverse. Could we just start here at Pie and Burger? And he said, well, hell yeah, come on down. I'd love to be on the show. So here's my chat and a little backstory about Pie and Burger. Mike, first of all, thank you very much for being on the inaugural podcast of Across the Dinerverse.
Well, you're more than welcome to be here. I understand you're a big diner fan and a big Pie and Burger fan. Yeah,
we come here a lot. And I don't know how much weight I've gained eating the pies here, but it's significant.
I can attest to that. You know, I started here when I was 18, and I don't even want to tell you how much I gained from my size 32 pants to what I wear today.
When was Pie and Burger established?
Pie and Burger opened in the fall of 1963. I don't have an exact date for it, but I actually do have a lot of the original documents from the city of Pasadena, the plans and the note from the health department and things like that. So it's kind of fun.
So this isn't a family thing from your family going back generations. You purchased the diner after it had already been opened.
Yes. I actually have an interesting history. When I went to USC and Pie and Burger was looking for a cook. So in the fall of 1972, I started working here as a cook with no intention of staying for 50 years. At the time, I was a pre-dental major at USC. After one semester of inorganic chemistry, I realized that I was not going to become a dentist. So I did a little bit of soul searching, but I loved working here. As you can see, we've got that open style kitchen, and there's a lot of banter that takes place from the kitchen to the customers, and it just had a great warm feel to it, even back in those early days. And I really liked what I did. And after I graduated, I didn't have a set plan, so I stayed here.
Wait, so you graduated USC, one of the premier colleges in the United States, and you did nothing with that. You stayed here at Pie and Burger.
Much to my parents' chagrin.
I bet.
Created a lot of issues in my family when I told them I was going to stay at Pie and Burger and be a night cook and the manager.
With a USC degree?
Yes, with a USC degree.
In what?
I actually ended up majoring in English. I loved English.
That's good for the menu board.
Good for the menu. I also minored in economics. So economics was a good thing. My parents sort of laughing about it now, but it was a really serious issue between them and myself.
Has owning and taking over Pie and Burger since when, 1992?
Fully in 1992.
Okay. Has that met your expectations?
It's not only met my expectations, but it's exceeded them in numerous ways. Obviously, financially, we're 2 blocks from Caltech, so you might be sitting here having lunch one day and having a Nobel Prize winner sitting next to you, scribbling on a napkin, working out.
Have you seen that?
We have seen it, yes. There was a woman.
By the way, just a little factoid, that the universe was discovered here in Pasadena. Did you know that?
Oh, yes, at Caltech, right?
Well, it was Edwin Hubble.
Yes.
At Mount Wilson Observatory. In fact, December 30th, 1924, he officially discovered the universe. And we've ripped off our name from that, as it across the Dinerverse. Who else comes and visits?
We have a fair amount of stars that we deal with on a regular basis.
Give me one star name that you've seen in here.
Well, how about if Oral Hershiser? Let's just use
the baseball great.
Baseball
for the
great.
LA Dodgers, yes.
Oral used to live down the street back when, in 1988, when the Dodgers won the World Series, and Oral was all everything. And he ate here probably 2 or 3 times a week. And he was probably, at that point in time, the absolute biggest, and he's such a nice guy. He would sign autographs for people. I do have a very strong feeling about the stars and whatever. I feel that stars or famous people, they're just people, and at the end of the day, and I respect their privacy. We have relationships with people that we've had really from 30 years with really famous stars, and I don't really think I need to tout them in order to promote the business. I think the business, the food that we have can promote itself.
What's the wildest thing you've seen happen inside the cafe here?
Oh, I mean, we've had several proposals. I don't want to say that's the wildest, but we've had people that have gotten engaged here. One young couple, she got up to go to the restroom, and he dropped the engagement ring in her water glass, and she came back, and she kept drinking the water, and she got down to where there was like an inch left in the glass, and then I actually was aware of what was going on. I actually thought she was going to swallow the thing, and finally he yelled at her and goes, "Aren't you going to look in the glass?" So that was fun. On the opposite side is someone that has come here, and a loved one passed away, and this was their favorite place, and they share that story with
That's great.
Those are really heart-wrenching in a lot of ways, but they shared the story of how they came here all the time, and sometimes it's hard for them to come back.
You have no regrets not becoming a dentist, working here, and becoming the eventual owner of Pie and Burger.
No, it's funny. This week I'll be celebrating my 50th year here working.
Congratulations.
How many people can get up in the morning and say for 50 years they never felt like they were going to work?
That's a gift.
It is, and it's just I'm very blessed by the life I've been given.
And I can see the tears in your eyes, and that's really beautiful.
Yeah, it's overwhelming at times.
That's amazing. Michael, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thank you for being part of the Pie and Burger family.
So I have to be honest, looking around Pie and Burger and looking at the people eating and dining there and trying to decide who I'm going to approach, to interview for this show and talk to. It's a little a little intimidating. I didn't expect it, I'm an outgoing person. I've interviewed hundreds and hundreds of people in my job, and I didn't think it would be difficult, but just walking up to a complete stranger and saying, hey, I want to interview for this new podcast that you've never heard of before. Would you mind? Kind of intimidating. But there was this one woman that I saw, and she was kind of eyeing me a little bit oddly. She was a little shorter, thin, wore glasses, but she had this really bright pink tartan jacket on, like it was Burberry. Looked really nice. But what attracted me, she had this headscarf. Now, my mom used to wear a headscarf all the time, and I asked her if she'd come over to my table and sit down and chat with me for a second, and she kind of warily agreed, but she came over. Now, I will say, this discussion I had took a couple of turns I wasn't expecting. We talked about suicide and cutting, alcohol and drug abuse, even death. So if those are triggering topics for you, go ahead and fast forward about 17 minutes, and you'll bypass all of it, and you can enjoy another part of the show. But in the meantime, wow, this lady, you just never know who you'll run into in a diner. Welcome to Across the Dinerverse. What is your name?
Mandy.
Hi, Mandy. Where are you from?
I'm from Pasadena, which is just north of Pasadena here.
Do you come to Pionburger often?
Haven't been here, in many years. My kids are grown now. They're 21 and 24, so I haven't been here since they were probably about 4 and 6. Not sure why. It's lovely and drive by all the time.
I can tell by your voice that you're not from America, obviously. I'm guessing England?
I am from England, yes.
Where?
I'm from London. Been here since I was 12.
And what brought you to America?
Oh, my father was in a band and he passed away, and so I technically inherited a house here.
Really? What is it? Is it a band people would know?
Yeah, if you're familiar with music from sort of the 60s and the 70s, then maybe rock and roll.
What instrument did he play?
He played the drums.
Is the band still around?
They are, yeah. He was known for not being the sanest person in the world.
Keith Moon?
Yes. Moon the Loon.
Really?
Yes.
You are Keith Moon's daughter, Keith Moon of The Who?
Yes. Yes, I am.
What you're listening to is Keith Moon actually playing the drums during the recording session for Who Are You back in the 70s. This is the isolated studio track, and he's just going crazy. He played a ceramic drum kit that was clear, so you could see through it, and his floor tom-toms used to be filled with water and goldfish. That's how crazy this guy was. He had living goldfish in his tom-toms, and I'm sure it was an effed up situation for the goldfish from their perspective. What the hell is this world we're living in? And Keith was asked, why do you have goldfish in your drums? And being the crazy guy that he was, he just simply said, well, even the best drummers get hungry. Was he a better drummer or a better hotel room destroyer?
I think a better drummer.
What was it like being Keith Moon's child?
It was a little chaotic, but my mom tried to keep life as normal as possible. We very much lived in a bubble, so it was definitely a different way to grow up, and we moved around a lot, and a lot of different people at the house than maybe my friends had.
What do you remember of him? Was he nice to you?
He was, for the most part. Drinking was an issue, and that changed his personality, so he could be not so nice then. And but that it was what it was. But when he was himself, and he was the Keith that my mom fell in love with, and when people came over to take pictures or do interviews, and then we all cuddle and be together, and those were times that I really enjoyed, actually, because I think he was on his best behavior.
So how has that legacy affected you in your whole life?
I think it's always been a bit of, it's been a bit of a shadow, and maybe affected some of the things that I've wanted to do musically and that sort of thing. I'm very much a horse person, so luckily that isn't affected by who my dad was. But I think it affects my interactions with other people. I'm never sure how people might react when I tell them. Or nowadays, a lot of people don't remember who he is, so it's not such an issue. But when I was younger, I used to look a good deal like him, so it was very evident. And my last name was Moon, so people would guess.
Are you a musician yourself?
I played drums in my early 20s, and I played percussion out in some clubs a little bit. And I love to play the bass and the stand-up bass guitar, but I don't play professionally. Horses have been my profession mostly.
Are you an equestrian?
Yes, I am an equestrian since 11 or 12, pretty much since we moved here. I started riding, and I've been teaching since I was 14 and competing, and I train horses. I used to train horses. I'm 56 now, so not so much. And teach people to ride, and most recently working with children with disabilities and trained to be more of a therapeutic riding instructor.
Well, that's beautiful.
Oh,
that's
thanks.
wonderful. That's wonderful. So, Western or English?
English is my background, but I do love both.
How many horses do you own?
We don't have any horses at the moment, mostly because I had back surgery and getting a bit older, but we have 2 miniature donkeys that I use not so much for equine therapy, but it's more like my friends can come over and pet them, so I still consider it equine therapy.
I'm just going to tell you this, and this is an absolutely true fact. More people are killed each year by donkeys than die in plane crashes.
Okay,
That's absolutely true. You can Google that. It's absolutely true. More people are killed by frickin' donkeys than die in plane crashes.
Watch out. Thank you. Okay.
All right, so I'm curious, what's been your experience living here in America? What's your take? Since you're from England, I'm sure you have relatives over there. You understand maybe a little bit of their, the whole royal monarchy and the parliament. What's your take and feeling of America, especially here in Pasadena in this area of Southern California?
Well, I mean, I've been here, as I said, since I was 12, and I'm 56, so I've very much grown up here. But my initial take on America, I had been here once on holiday when I was 9, so I was familiar with just how big everything was, how big the portions were, and just everything, the cars, everything was sort of oversized to how it is in England, especially London. And then it's funny when I go back there to visit. I love America, and I've had every opportunity to move back to England if I wanted to, but I find when I go back there that a lot of the the pretense is sort of stripped away. People just seem a bit more real, a bit more down to earth. Not as inclined to fight about the really little things with each other. And as far as I know, politics go, it's a very different government than here. But there's not so much side taking, and people are just a little bit nicer to each other.
In England.
Yeah, that's what I found, unfortunately. But then again, not enough to make me ever want to move back there. So, I mean, I love America, and I think if we can stick to what we believe in, and what our gut tells us a lot of the time, and not sort of believe a lot of the weirdness that's out there. And I think, and I was talking to Roger recently, Roger Daltrey, the singer for The Who, and we were talking about just how things are right now and this Elvis movie that came out, because he's been wanting to make a movie, and he is going to make a movie about Keith one of these days.
Your father, they're making a movie, a biopic about your father.
Yeah. We actually, Focus Features has
oh my gosh,
has picked it up, so it is happening. It just there's been no casting yet. I think the script is finally finished.
Have you read it?
Yeah, it's really good.
Are you going to be okay with the things they show about your father in there? You're comfortable with that?
Mm-hmm, yeah,
have you come to peace with who he was?
I think so, yeah, especially as an adult, especially having had my own issues with some of his issues, and being more understanding that, it wasn't because he was a horrible person and wanted to hurt people. It was because he was somebody who had a problem. And, and unfortunately, he was trying to stop that when he died.
So he was trying to get sober.
He overdosed on a drug called heminevrin, which is he was under prescription after doing a small deal in treatment. He did go to treatment a little bit and was taking this drug, but he shouldn't have had it at home. It should only have been in the hospital under a doctor's supervision.
Right.
And And being Keith, he was going to a party and thought people would be disappointed if he wasn't, the Keith Moon that they expected, and he wasn't drinking. So he did another kind of drug, but he also took more of these pills, and he kept taking them. And some people said it could have been suicide. I've always thought it was an accidental overdose because of the way he took drugs. He would take handfuls of things. So they found 32 undigested pills in his stomach, which is why some people thought perhaps it was intentional. But just the way everything was and his life was going, it didn't seem like it. He was engaged. Of course, my mom, being my mom, said, well, that's why he killed himself. He just announced his engagement. But no, we think it was accidental. But he was trying to stop.
So a movie's going to be done about your father. You were talking to Roger Daltrey. Now back to your point, which is you and Roger were talking about kind of the temperature of America or the world. Yeah, he blames not just America, but he blames just how the way people are, the meanness in the world, a lot of it on the internet. It's like a Pandora's box. Yes, I think and that's one of the reasons that we are doing this podcast, or I'm doing this podcast across the Dinerverse, is to give people, everyday people in little cafes and diners across America where they come for comfort food and just to enjoy each other and company, to get their thoughts about things, to get their life experience. Because I think when we sit down across from one another, the way you and I are sitting down right now, you can't help but have empathy and understanding for the other person. Yeah, I agree, and we're human, and we're all human. We can get along. It seems like because of a lot of this, because of the hiding behind everything, the name calling, just unbelievable meanness and bullying that can come out of that kind of behavior, and then it seems to get carried on, unfortunately, into everyday life a little bit. The way we drive, the way we treat each other. And if we could just, and I see these little public service announcements on TV for kindness, and I think that's lovely. I think it's sad that we need to be reminded to be kind, but I think it's good that it's there. So you're a mom? Yes. How many kids? I have 2 children. Okay. I have I have one daughter who's 24, and I have a son who was born female but identifies as male, so they're transgender. So he's 21. Can I ask you, because I have no experience with that, what was that process like as a parent, having your child tell you that, and then certainly a lot of talk today about what you should do, what you shouldn't do. I'm just asking you because I know nothing, okay? Share your experience and the feelings that you grappled with kind of going through that process. Yeah, my son, who is she then, came to me and at 12 and said that they were gay, and I said, I love you no matter who you love, no matter who you like, you're my child no matter what. But anyway, at about 14, I was in the market actually, and my son called me and said, Mom, I really need to talk to you about something right now. I said, okay, I was wheeling the cart around, and he tried to explain to me a little bit what transgender was, and said, I really feel that I'm transgender. Would you love me if I was transgender? And I said, I'd love you if you wanted to be a giraffe. And I have no idea why I said giraffe, but so that was the same thing. So it was it's been a lot of learning. The kids are way ahead of us. They've already done all this research. They already know everything that goes with all of this, as far as the testosterone and having an implant to block the estrogen, and that affects their height as well. So so very much you can't do all of this at home. So I'm like, okay, if we're going to do this, we're going to find out. So we found a really good doctor. We went there and we met with her. She very much deals with the emotional as well as the physical aspects of kids who are changing. I think it's been more challenging for my husband than for me. Definitely just remembering the he and the she. But which I was talking to a lady a little bit about this before, and
and saying that it's funny to notice how the kids, the things that they were hypersensitive about in their teens, about, the don't misgender me and, be more respectful. And we're trying to be respectful, but they didn't realize that we were still learning. We had this child for 12, 14 years this way, and we were used to this. And I think that they couldn't realize at the time why we couldn't just switch, just call me he. It's just no big deal.
Right.
I'm your son now. And it's like, no, it's a whole mental process. And you do grieve a little bit. I think that, but there's no death.
The loss of the daughter.
Of the daughter, yeah. And you have to get used to it. And also the physicality of it. My son hasn't had any modifications other than testosterone. He takes testosterone. So they have what they call top surgery sometimes, and the bottom surgery is more extreme, and they're not even thinking about that. But they're attracted to people that identify the same as them. Mm-hmm. So his fiance is transgender as well. I think loving your child, no matter what, does make it easier, because it's never been, well, should I accept it or not? Which, I think I'm lucky in that respect. I don't have a lot of other talk in my head about it. It was just, well, I love them and they're going through this, but also my son was diagnosed with ADHD in first grade. So this was a child who very much went from one thing to another to another to another.
That was what I was going to ask you. Is there any concern? Is it a phase or a fad? And it's kind of, the talk of the pop culture moment. Yeah. Are you concerned that, and so what? If a year from now he decides to transition back to being female, you will still love him, her,
Oh,
she.
Yeah. They would be a very hairy female after all this testosterone. They technically could. I mean, it would take
one
a
of the
while.
practical things maybe people don't think about.
Yeah, because he does have a beard, yes, facial hair, and
wow.
so which all takes getting used to be honest. I wanted to do the right thing by him, by not just giving in to what he said as well, like you said about it just being a phase. Or so that's why I was so grateful for the doctor that I could talk to separately as well, and and I was concerned about the height issue. The estrogen stops when you stop the estrogen. I didn't know that estrogen controls a girl's growth. I didn't know that, their height, and so I was like, if you want to be a boy, you might want to be tall, because he's about my height, and I'm 5'5". And there's a high rate of suicide with these kids.
Right.
And at that point, he was 14 or 15. And I was not arguing with the doctor, but saying, do you think it's wise if he wants to be a boy? Don't you think he'd want to be taller? She's like, do you want him alive or do you want him tall? My son did cut. He cut, and he was hospitalized once for cutting. And at the time, said that he might have been wanting to do some real damage to himself. So he was held for 72 hours. So he's been through things, as a result of a lot in our lives. But I think just that confusion, the cutting seemed to be a release. Luckily, he doesn't do it now. Now he talks to other people about stopping doing it.
Well, that's wonderful. Taking his own life experience and sharing it with others to hopefully, affect a better outcome. That's great. Well, Mandy, I'm just blown away by meeting you and here at this pie and burger.
I know. What a wonderful happenstance. It's really nice to meet you.
In Pasadena.
Aww.
And I thank you so much for being on the podcast, and I wish
My
you very
pleasure.
well. And you can come back on. Maybe I can exchange numbers with you here at the end of the show, because when the movie comes out, we can maybe talk about the movie again.
Of course.
All right.
Anytime.
Nice
We'll talk
meeting
about
you.
you next time. Okay. Bye-bye.
Now, the idea for the podcast is to interview people inside the diner who just happen to be there. And I don't know them, they don't know me. And I sit down and we talk about their life, and we learn something about their experience in America and how they feel about it. I did, for this premiere episode, kind of stack the deck with a friend of mine, but it's a coworker, and he has a very unique life story. His name is Adam Yamaguchi. He's a vice president and executive producer with CBS News. He's also a correspondent on the show I write and produce on for CBS, which is Innovation Nation, and he's one of our correspondents. And Adam and I have worked together for a long, long time, and we've traveled all over the place. So I thought he'd be a great guest because he's a first-generation Japanese-American born in the San Gabriel area, which includes Pasadena, Arcadia, Monterey Park. And so here is Adam Yamaguchi. Nice to see you.
Good to see you. It's so rare to actually have time outside of our shoots.
We've traveled the country.
Yeah, I mean every inch, every corner of this country, it seems.
A lot of long car rides.
Yeah, I mean I'd say that one of the true gifts in working with you and working on the show for, I don't know, it's 7-8 years now, I think, has been the ability to discover America.
Right.
There's so many nooks and crannies and pockets of America that, frankly, I really had not had much familiarity with, that we've been able to see. And much of my career has been overseas. I've traveled to over 100 countries. I've been in many, many conflict zones. And it really wasn't until the last handful of years that I've been able to discover America. And, you know, it's sort of most correspondents kind of have the opposite trajectory. They'll start here and then they'll go overseas. And for me, it was the exact opposite. But I have to say that getting to understand the world first and then coming home and understanding America has given me such an appreciation of all the gifts that America has and its uniqueness in the world. And a lot of that is owed to the people who don't live in the big coastal cities. The spirit of innovation, the spirit of entrepreneurship is very much alive and well in every part of the country.
And you grew up in Arcadia, which is the town next to Pasadena, right?
Yeah, so I grew up all around the area. We moved around quite a bit. I was born here in the U.S. I'm a first-generation Japanese-American, and my parents had moved from Japan a couple years before they had me.
What made them leave Japan to come to America?
Japan's an interesting place, and in the U.S. we pride ourselves on individualism. Rugged individualism is what has defined America since the early days. Japan is much more of a collective society, and what that means is that, sure, people have their individual lives and personalities and whatnot, but you don't want to stick out. You don't want to stray from the crowd.
Am I wrong that people hold allegiances to corporations and a lifelong job more than they do their own family?
Yeah, I mean, that's changed, but yes.
Wow.
During Japan's meteoric economic rise through the 50s, 60s, and 70s, the term Japan-ique became a kind of a well-used term. And that's precisely what it was. You basically become a company man or woman. You dedicate your life to helping the corporation become as big and prosperous and powerful as possible. And then you'd go home and see your family, you know, when you were done with that. And
that's crazy.
It is.
That's what that song "Turning Japanese" must be about.
There are all sorts of.
I know the classic one. I know the classic one, but if you really listen to the lyrics, I think it's about that work ethic and allegiance to a corporation or something besides yourself that makes you turn Japanese.
Right.
Yeah. I don't think it's about getting off.
Well, that's the more fun.
Yes.
Urban legend.
So why did your parents leave? Were they tired? Was your dad and mom tired of those rules and wanted to come to America just to have more freedom?
So my parents were both the black sheep of their families. And I think that very early on, as they were growing up, they sort of realized, you know what, we're not like the other.
What made you, or what incident happened that made you want to become a journalist?
I think it was all accidental. My first taste of journalism came in high school, and I worked for the school newspaper. And to be honest with you, it was just a way for me to get into college. You're a junior in high school, or you're a sophomore in high school, junior in high school. You're starting to think about what colleges you can get into, and you're trying to rack up all the extracurricular activities. I was told that being a journalist or working for the school newspaper was something that would impress colleges when they were looking at your application. It was purely that. And once I dove in, I realized, hey, I actually kind of like this. And I eventually went to UCLA, newspaper there. It was a daily newspaper. This is a way for me to, have something to do as a freshman. And then it just
Parties certainly weren't on the agenda. Girls certainly weren't on the agenda. I was just going to be one hell of a journalist.
Freshman year was a total blur. I mean, I think that all those things happened at the same time, and sometimes the partying, I think, actually took place in the newsroom at the paper.
What was it like being a Japanese American growing up in the San Gabriel Valley? Did you face discrimination? I know that there's a large Asian community here, a lot of Chinese, Koreans, and Japanese. Did you experience discrimination, or was it pretty a melting pot?
So I did grow up in a melting pot. I would say that through elementary, middle school, and high school, there was teasing.
Hell, I was a fat white kid. I was bullied from day one, so I get it.
Yeah, I mean, I look back and I chalk it up to, look, kids are kids. I don't remember experiencing that at all.
Which I will say, based on my experience, both as a parent and as a bullied kid growing up, I think you need to have a little bit of bullying because the world is hard. Yeah. The world is going to throw crap at you all the time. I think the childhood playground bullying, to some degree, is kind of beneficial in giving you that thicker skin to mature and face the world. I'm not saying we should endorse it, but I'm saying if we totally just put everybody in a bubble and cocoon them from every single hurt and pain that there is, you're making a very sensitive, super anxious person for the future.
I hear you. I'll push back a little bit in the word bullying has sort of taken on a new dimension, right? I was ribbed a lot as a kid for looking different. I was probably teased more just because I was a scrawny kid than anything else.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, a certain level of that, I think, is normal and natural. Where the line is, I think, is up for debate. But to come back to your question, did I feel as though I was discriminated against as a kid? I would say no with an asterisk. And again, some of those same friends of mine will say, well, you're just naive. You have your head in the sand. But I can only tell you what I felt or didn't feel, and I didn't feel it overtly.
At UCLA, the Daily Bruin, you rose to the position of editor, right? Mm-hmm. Were you the editor in charge of the whole paper?
Yes.
All right. So, tell me one example of where you went after a story and it blew up in your face and caused a big, massive headache for the school, the paper.
That came fast and furious for me. One of the first issues, once I became editor, was we began looking at the restaurant ratings. So if you're here in LA or in California, you go outside any restaurant and you'll see a grade, A, B, C. And so we were all new to this grading system. And many of the restaurants were as well. And what we simply did was publish the ratings of all of these restaurants. There were many A's, there were some B's, and there were some C's.
Uh-oh.
The simple act of putting that out there created a huge stir.
I'm sure the people who got the C were just really pissed.
Oh, they were furious. They were pissed. And the problem for us was that they were our advertisers.
Excellent. Excellent.
So
why didn't you run this by Business Affairs, Mr. Yamaguchi?
That's what I got dragged into right away. So it was a very quick lesson in journalism that sometimes you are going to go after stories that are going to generate controversy, right or wrong. That's just part of the business.
How hard is it to be a journalist today with social media and the blasting and everything else? I mean, everybody's chasing stories. Right. You've got, quote-unquote, legitimate or non-legitimate outlets publishing information that's not researched or fact-checked and things like that? Who's going to get to break the story? You know, the competition is so fierce for clicks and viewers and eyeballs. How hard is it to really tell a well-balanced research story as a journalist today?
Really hasn't changed how I do my job. The North Star for any responsible journalist is always going to be facts and objectivity. Now, objectivity can be a tricky word in these days. What I always strive for when talking to people or when pursuing a story is I want to be challenged. You know, I think that one thing that social media has done is that it's taken so much of the nuance and detail out of really complex, weighty issues. And
dumped it down to clickbait.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, clickbait is absolutely the way to sort of define our times. We're not having the conversations that we perhaps did at an earlier time.
That's why I'm doing this podcast.
And that's why I'm so excited that you're doing this. I think it's so important.
We are more similar than we are different.
Absolutely.
And you can have a political leaning one way or the other, but ultimately we're all Americans. We're in this together, and we got to make this boat float.
You know, it's been difficult to see the divisions. So you're right. I agree with everything that you've said, but the reality is we do live in a very divided time because of the way we interact with one another, which is through this digital town square that is gamed to put you in this camp or that camp.
Despite all that, why do people from all over the world still look at America and want to find some way somehow to come here?
I had an experience about 5 years ago. My crew and I flew down to Colombia, and what we set out was to follow the path of migrants who are trying to get to the U.S. We land ourselves in this port town that is just south of this jungle called the Darien Gap. This is a 60-mile stretch of virgin jungle that essentially functions almost like a wall between North and South America.
Which country does this jungle belong to?
Panama and Colombia.
They share it. Okay.
So the actual legal border is right smack dab in the middle of this jungle. Now, what happens when you have an environment in which there are no roadways, no police presence, no military presence? It becomes a place where all manner of illicit activity can happen. It is one of the main corridors for transporting goods, transporting drugs, and all manner of smuggled contraband.
Human trafficking?
Absolutely. And what I saw there were people who were so desperate to flee whatever country they may have been coming from in search of a better life, putting themselves at risk of potential death going through the jungle. CBS allowed me to go into the jungle. We followed a number of migrants.
Of course they allowed you because, you know, you're carrying your own insurance on this one, aren't you, Adam? Right? Okay, you go for it.
Exactly. I was also very new at the time, and so they probably weren't paying very close attention to me.
Yeah, let the new kid go. He'll be fine.
Exactly. And the reality is, as soon as I got to where we were, I was like, what the fuck have I just done? But what we found was that the migrants themselves, many of them just had, a ratty pair of shoes and like a small bag to last themselves that whole journey. But they were undeterred throughout the entire experience because they knew that they had no choice. While I'm fretting about not having cell reception on my phone.
By the way, I will say Adam's the only guy I know who carries 2 or 3 phones because he's that busy and important.
While we're fretting about our first world problems, we're with migrants who really have no other choice. And to see their determination to carry on really changed how I look at immigration.
The story that you just told, I'm kind of thinking, if that person went through that Darien Gap jungle, survived, made it to America, if they have that kind of determination, that's the kind of person we want in this country to try and make it.
Absolutely.
Why not give them a shot?
You're dead on. And, I think that we've seen throughout our history that it is those who have understood adversity, who have that much more of an appreciation of what America has to offer, that they're going to work that much harder to pay back America for opening its arms, I think is something that really gets lost in heated conversation. Totally understand that there are laws in place and that the U.S. has to safeguard those laws. We don't have the capacity to allow every person who wants to come in to come in.
We just can't open the borders. It's a free-for-all.
Right.
It's not sustainable.
But I think what gets lost is what you just hit upon, is that we have so much as a country to gain.
Which I think circles back to your origin story of your parents in Japan. I don't know what the immigration policies are, but it seems like Japan is only filled with Japanese. They don't allow a lot of other people to come in, and now it's starting to bite them in the ass a little bit, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think Japan offers up a real glimpse into the future. Japan has one of the most restrictive immigration laws of any industrialized country in the world. As you said, it is biting them in the ass because its population is declining rapidly. We're talking about anywhere between 500,000 to 1 million people each year.
Losing.
And
And not being replaced by potential immigrant.
come to the U.S. Our birth rate is also low, and our population would be in decline if not for immigration.
This is like to keep business going, commerce going, factories going, manufacturing, building, construction. I mean, the whole economic structure, you need bodies to help keep that moving forward, right?
Yeah. Japan has known that this demographic and economic issue has been around the corner for quite some time. There have been warning signs for decades that this was going to happen. And while they have allowed more immigration in recent years and decades than in the 50s and 60s when they were coming up, it's still not enough. It's still highly restrictive. One of the main reasons for that is that policymakers in positions of power have kind of made the decision, even though restricting immigration may hurt us economically, may hurt us in terms of wielding power on the global stage diplomatically, that we want to continue to exist as a Japanese society, and that allowing people from other countries with other languages, other customs, other traditions can hurt the very identity of who we are as a people and as a nation. And in some ways have made the decision that those things may be more important than to continue to grow our economy. Oftentimes people will ask me, is Japanese society just racist? Japanese are some of the friendliest, most welcoming people in the world. They love embracing people from other countries, but immigration...
Just don't move here.
Exactly.
Just don't move. Come visit, spend your dollars, just don't move here.
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned, going back to the start of this conversation, when I was talking about my parents, Japan is a very collective, conformist society. You don't want to color outside the lines. Well, even when I go to Japan, you can tell I'm not from there. The way I walk, the volume of my voice, the way I sit in a subway.
I love the story you did when you were on the old Current network, which was an Al Gore network, and you were a documentary producer, and you went to Japan to do this experiment because women aren't marrying men. They like to date men, or they like to go to clubs and have an evening out with men, and then that's about it. Yeah. And so you went to one of these clubs as one of the club dates,
yeah,
and they dolled you all up in with the Japanese accoutrement of the shirt and all the pants and all that kind of stuff. You were noticeably taller than the average Japanese man, more broad-shouldered, more muscular. Adam works out 5 times a day. And what was hilarious about the piece is that you were not asked out on one dance, one date, one sit down and have cocktails or dinner with it. You had a 0 batting average that night.
I was just a dud. I mean, it was the most sobering and yeah, it was not a good experience. But exactly your point.
You were different.
I was different, and they didn't know what to make of me. I was like this alien to them. You contrast that with the U.S. This is a country that has
been built by
built
immigrants.
its back on the contributions of people from around the world.
Yeah. If we want to continue to be one of the great nations of the world, we have to be open to allowing people from all around the world to be part of our fabric.
Owing to our very heritage as an experiment, arguably one of the greatest experiments in modern human history has been the U.S.
You travel around the world. What does the rest of the world think of the United States, even today in our crazy whack society?
People still want to be here.
Really?
People still want to come. I mean, they look at the U.S. and yes, they ask about the latest crazy thing that's happened in the U.S., but it doesn't change the fact that...
What is your orange leader like? That big orange leader, what is he like?
Yeah, I mean, here's the reality. Regardless of what president is in power, there's always something going on in the U.S. Right now, we're fixated. We're in a certain moment. And the last few years have been very tumultuous for us as a society, very polarizing. If you take a step back and kind of look at America from afar, it's still the greatest country on the face of the earth.
Well, my friend, I couldn't agree with you more, and it's been an honor working with you these last years and traveling the road on Innovation Nation. Okay, I'm just going to be honest with you. Adam is like, every time I travel with him, all he eats is pure meat and a salad. And so if you could have anything on this board and just go crazy once in your life, what would be your biggest cheat meal?
Well, I don't really consider a burger a cheat meal because, as you know, I'm going to leave the bun on the plate.
And you'll have 3 patties.
Exactly. As long as there are no carbs, I'm okay. Because as we know, carbs are illegal in certain zip codes in the LA area.
If your BMI in the Los Angeles area goes above 25, you are ticketed. Fat shame you right on the street.
But I will say the cheat for me here, because again, the burger is not considered a cheat for me. It's a staple. I would say an apple pie a la mode.
Well, that's why it's pie and burger. You'll get the best pie, apple pie a la mode here at Pie and Burger in Pasadena. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Take care, and we'll see you soon.
I'll see you very soon.
That's it. The premiere episode of Across the Dinerverse is put to bed. Thank you for listening. Upcoming episodes include Dottie's Diner in Florida, and I'm working on another diner in Northern Virginia outside of Washington, D.C., which should be really, really good. So thank you for listening. I hope you support us on patreon.com/Dinerverse. That's patreon.com/Dinerverse. Across the Dinerverse. What's your story?